The biggest change in my career came from applying the support challenge matrix to the sales presentation and knowing when do I need to challenge a client and when do I need to support a client.
Well, welcome everybody back to the How to Sell Insurance podcast. I'm Grant Lieber, joined by my good friend, Mr. Ryan Federico, the man, the myth, the signaling aficionado.
We are missing Ashton Delango Lunday today because he had a baby. So shout out to Daddy Delango Lunday and new daughter Delango Lunday. And I'm sure you guys will hear more about that at some point in time. But he was going to record from the hospital, and then we decided that would probably be a bad idea. So
yeah, we thought we'd let it enjoy it. And the biggest shout out of all to Mama Delango Lunday for really putting in the most effort of really any of them in this this scenario. But we're super excited for Ashton. And so if you do see him, congratulate him. Regardless of when you see this, whether it's, right after it comes out or maybe even 18 years later, congratulate him on the new kid. Either way, that might not make sense when if he's 18, but I think it'll be funny. Well, hey, let's get into this. So we wanted to spend today talking about how leaders handle conflict within their agency, number one, and then also just how when we're mentoring and coaching agents, how we decide when it's time to bring the right challenge to them, when it's time to maybe put your foot down, be a little bit firm, versus when it's time to really bring support, where to be kind of that more nurturing kind of coach. I always think back to the coaches and mentors that I really respected and that I remember over the years, and probably the most prominent one was my varsity high school soccer coach, Coach Jason. And Coach Jason was not someone that I would consider very friendly. I wouldn't consider him the most nurturing or loving, but I can tell you that I learned the most, and I felt like his feedback carried the most weight. And I just believe it was because he was always in a place where he was there to congratulate you when you did a job well done, but he was really there to bring kind of the feedback when there was improvement, and he was not afraid to call people out. And I think that it's so challenging to know as a leader how to bring the right thing to people without really understanding where people are at, asking the right questions, and having just kind of a well-rounded understanding of like where people are at mindset-wise, process-wise. And so, Ryan, I really want to talk through this with you. I guess there's kind of maybe two sides to this. So maybe first of all, just like as you've just dealt with general, let's just start with conflict. Like as you've kind of grown your agency, I believe that people get paid more money because they're capable of dealing with larger problems. I think that's really what people, as you scale income, what do you really get paid to do? Solve a more complex problem. So I guess I just wanted to start with, as you've kind of scaled in leadership, and not only in this business, but maybe even in prior businesses, like what are some of the ways that you've gotten better at handling conflict, knowing how to diffuse, knowing when it's time to kind of, be a little bit more passive and just kind of let things go versus when it's time where you really need to step in and maybe make a decision?
I would say a couple things. So, number one, I agree with you 100%. Like, as you are scaling an organization, like typically you're making more money because you're solving bigger problems. Like, even if you're running a sales organization, like you're selling more, you're solving a bigger problem for the insurance companies. And so you're solving a bigger problem for the families that we get protected, and you're protecting more of them. And so you're getting paid more for that. But I think that what I've learned is, because this used to totally knock me off, off kilter, and I would get sucked into drama. I think there's some people that deal with things in different ways. Like, obviously that's pretty redundant to say, but there's people sometimes deal with conflict by removing themselves, by, turning a blind eye to conflict, or, just running away from conflict. Some people are confrontational to conflict, and they want to control conflict. And I think I was the third most common, which is, I just loved the drama of conflict. And so I would just like, I'd love to hear more about, this drama. It's almost like watching a soap opera or like some kind of a TV show or something like that. I would find myself wrapped up in all this drama that I really didn't need to be in, and that wasn't really too difficult to solve, but I was taking a longer time solving it, or assisting, or being, a leader in that moment, because it was entertaining. And it wasn't like I didn't need to do the thing that was like that I was putting off, so it's like, it's another thing, like, when I didn't want to make dials and I needed to clean the garage, all of a sudden, or, like whatever. And so I think like as I've learned that I was doing that and that it was just another form of procrastination, and that I know that the bigger that my agency gets, the more I'm going to need to intervene in things like this, and the more I'm going to need to teach other people how to intervene in things. I think the key for me now is expecting it to come. It's kind of like I expect objections to come. It's like I was having a conversation with somebody whose agency is growing at a fast pace just yesterday. And, I was just like, man, I know the stresses that go along with, taking an agency from 50,000 to 250,000. And I'm sure you got a lot on your hands now. And, he was kind of like, wait, when you say that, what do you mean by that? Cause he hadn't like hit any of those things yet. And so I didn't want to like sink his ship or anything and tell him that, like maybe give him a bunch of fear about like what's going to happen or project my experience on him. But I just kind of stated some of the I guess obvious things. It was like, hey, you're going to have like fraud that happens in your organization, and you're going to have people that don't get along, and you're going to have people that you're like depending on to do things that don't show up, and you're going to have policies that cancel and roll-ups that hit you. These are very common things in building an agency. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be people that fall short. And I think for me, it's just like I go into a mortgage protection appointment or a life insurance appointment expecting that I'm going to get objections. I just expect now that there's going to be these conflicts that come up. There's going to be people that fall short. There's going to be chargebacks. There's going to be roll-ups. There's going to be fraud. There's going to be drama. And I'm not surprised when it happens. So it doesn't knock me off my game. I can deal with it quickly because I'm kind of expecting it to come, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think that what I've definitely seen over the years is that a majority of the conflict comes from, it really boils down to an emotional immaturity. I think that's really where it comes down to, a lack of personal development, emotional immaturity, however you want to necessarily label that. And it's usually by people that are not doing the right things and are not being profitable. It's very rare that you have very like productive people, leaders, or those that are working on becoming a leader, really creating challenges. The majority of the challenges that I've had to kind of work with have been from those that it's kind of like, the smallest dog has the biggest bark. And I've kind of seen that be true. And so, one thing that I think is so important to evaluate if you're in a position where you have a downline agent who, might bring a challenge to you, is kind of determining, is my course of action to actually step in and, because like sometimes bringing something up can potentially bring more drama and more problems than actually the whole thing itself. So there's some times where you just need to go, hey, listen, you guys go stand in your corners. Let's just move on. And that's kind of it. And then, kind of time heals all wounds type thing. Other times there might be something where you actually do need to step in because there's a standard that you as an agency owner, that you as a leader have built. And you need to kind of say, listen, we have a standard within our team of how we conduct ourselves, how we treat other people. You violated that. We need to have a conversation about this and make sure that we get it corrected. And if we can't get it corrected, there might not be a place for you. And I'm not saying to immediately go to that, but that's just something that you always have to be ready to do. Like when you're working with people and you're addressing conflict, you have to keep in mind kind of the range of outcomes that could potentially be present there. And another important element of this is, what have people done on their own to try and create the resolution before maybe it came to you? A lot of times, especially when you talk about the drama, you brought kind of an interesting perspective of like, I find it entertaining. You're like, I kind of just like, I'm watching like a live, like a reality show. It's like, I'm in the reality show, right? And I just love it.
I'm not setting appointments like as I got to deal with this. It's right in front of me now. Oh my God,
it's exciting, and there's things, there's action, right? I think that you have to realize, like, if you're in that, is what you're trying to solve taking you away from income producing activities. I mean, you brought up an important point. Like, there's people who are always going to butt heads, and I can just kind of, gossip about them, or I could kind of, constantly have conversations with both of them about what we're going to do to move forward. But if I find that at the end of the day, it's actually impacting my ability to move my business forward and their ability to move their business forward, that's something that I don't have time for. And so I've kind of realized that I'm only really reserving time to deal with issues that really bubble over and repeatedly pop pop up. Is that something that you're kind of seeing as well?
Yeah, man, I agree with that, and like I also think that there are the question that you asked of like what have they done already to kind of remedy this. I think that like when I was running into these issues, because I haven't always been on the opposite side of these things, right? Like I was I was the one causing the issues many times, and I was the one causing the drama many times, and so like I've had to grow and I've had to invest in lots of different personal development, from affirmations and meditations and stuff like that to learning my identity. I work with an identity coach. Shout out Rocky Garza, is an amazing human being. I have a business coach, and I do 5 voices training, and I've discovered my shortcomings, I guess, and I've put in the work to become somebody who isn't weighed down by these things, right? Because I was definitely heavily weighed down by these things before, and they were very common. Like for me, when I was causing them on the opposite side, like they were like the same things that would come up. Like I didn't get to see the pattern of behavior until like I'd been fired the 3rd time. You know what I mean? And it was just like, oh, maybe this is me. Maybe it's my fault. And honestly, it was coming, to the company that we're at now when I really got my hands wrapped around the 5 voices, when I could understand my voice as a pioneer and being an immature pioneer. But I think like putting the accountability on the agent or on the person on your team of just like the way that I phrase it now is like, I just want you to imagine that in the future, you've grown a team that's the size of mine right now, and that you're running that team and somebody on your team is going through what you're going through and you're in my shoes. Like, what would you tell that person? How would you coach that person on your team if they were going through the same conflict? If it wasn't you and your emotions are removed from the situation and you're just sort of fair and balanced, how would you be coaching that person to get out of it? And sometimes they can see it, and sometimes they're still so like pent up rage, or whatever it is. And like they're so convinced that they're right, or that like they've been harmed or whatever, that it's just like, hey, maybe it's just I was there too. Like maybe it's just not the time nor this is gonna be able to get through to them. And that gives me a good barometer of like, is this a time when I can actually break through to them and just be like, how can I support you in this? Or is this a time when like they're just still so blinded by the drama or whatever the issue is that it doesn't really matter what I say at this point. They're just kind of convinced that they're right. And I can go like, hey, go back to your corner and cool off now. And we got more important things to focus on. And it's not the time to bring challenge. It's just the time to kind of separate and bring support and get them back focused on whatever they need to focus on. I think it's like calibrating, asking the questions that allow me to kind of assess whether or not it's the time to bring challenge or whether it's the time to bring support, whether it's the time to do nothing. And I think that's probably the ever long journey of leadership, most likely.
That's right. It's the never ending equation of, how do I calibrate the right thing to help people get where they need to go? So let's maybe transition to that. So let's not necessarily, put this in the vein of sort of conflict, just sort of just general coaching of agents. We talk about support and challenge, and, you mentioned a great tool Giant has, about the 5 voices, which is a great book and really allows people to develop their leadership voice. If that's something you haven't done, it's probably the number one piece of kind of homework I'd give to you is to learn, what it's like to be on the other side of you. That's really what it does is kind of puts a mirror up and helps you understand that. And I think that's one of the biggest overall kind of like themes of personally developing is you just understand, what it's like to be on the receiving end of your coaching, your just how you kind of conduct yourself on a day to day. And just like, what you brought up, Ryan, like, if you were to say to someone, hey, be in my position, let's switch roles. How would you handle this? What's funny is like for them, it's easy for them to realize like, okay, now like it's actually kind of easy to put yourself in other people's shoes and kind of interpret how you might do things differently, which is a powerful tool. In fact, I think there was a study done where they asked somebody to build an imaginary table of like some of the greatest like business minds and like kind of whoever you'd want to get in a room and be like, all right, I want Elon Musk and I want Bezos and I want Bill Gates. Like they put together this thing and they said, hey, I want you to imagine you're having a board meeting with them. And I'd like you to kind of tell us what you think they would say. And they mapped that out. And then they actually got those people in a room together and asked them those questions. And it was extremely similar. So you actually can kind of like get a feel for what people are going to say if you know a little bit about them and kind of their history. But In terms of support and challenge, so this is another giant tool, is we talk about the idea of creating a liberator culture. Liberator culture is where you
Yeah.
bring the proper amount of support and the proper amount of challenge. And we had a previous episode where my good friend and business partner, Alec Myers, did a phenomenal job talking through this tool. But I
Yep.
wanted to kind of go back to that
Totally.
with you, because when we're working in a coaching capacity with folks on our team, and as we're maybe talking, so maybe we're talking to someone who, just brought on their first agent, or maybe they have a small growing team and they're trying to figure out, like, how do I be there to help people, but not like kind of smother them and also kind of like challenge? Because I think there is a tendency very early on to be a protector. A protector is someone who does not bring enough challenge and they bring way too much support. They're trying to do everything for people. They're trying to like kind of drag them across the finish line with them. They're not really empowering them to kind of go through these things in the way that they need to. And I guess I just wanted to ask you, as you're bringing agents on, what are the ways that you've been able to kind of avoid that maybe overprotective, super high support culture?
Well, I mean, honestly, the way I've been able to avoid that, or was able to avoid it in the future, is that like I was on the opposite end of the spectrum, which is also completely unhealthy, right? So it's like I think in our industry specifically, there's two main groups of people that come in. There's all kinds of walks of life that have a ton of success in our industry, and we've seen all kinds of backgrounds and personalities be amazing at this. The high C personalities of the disc profile, that are typically like your accountants and engineers, and like we have a very predictable system. It's very easy to analyze, that is run by accountants and engineers. That's what an actuary is, right? So it's like those people do really, really well in our industry. I think we get these big groups of people. We get one group of people that are like your traditional kind of salespeople that are a little bit more like dominating in the dominator quadrant. And then we get a big group of people that just like want to help people and love our industry because we want to make an impact on families, and we want to like help protect families, and we want to do something good in the world. And so we get a lot of those people as well. And I think those are the people that struggle a little bit more when you're building a team with like the protector quadrant. By the way, I just want to say, like, this concept of the support challenge matrix, go back and watch that episode with Alec Myers, because the support challenge matrix applies to every area of your life. It applies to sales. In like probably the biggest change in my career, came from applying the support challenge matrix to the sales presentation and knowing when do I need to challenge a client and when do I need to support a client. Like there's plenty of clients that like I left their house going like, we were great friends. They're like, we had an awesome relationship, right? But like they didn't get insurance, and they're like, we're going to get back to you soon. And, like, of course, like Ryan's amazing. We're such great friends. Like but we don't need to buy insurance now. We can think about this as long as we want. We can buy later. And I would leave a lot of houses just being their friend and like, and having great rapport with them. And it was like, well, those are people that I needed to challenge. Those are people that I needed to say like, no, guys, I cannot leave this house until you get insurance coverage. You just told me if you're in a car accident tomorrow, you're going to lose this house. No, I can't walk out of this house and without you guys getting insurance coverage. Let's put some coverage in place. And I needed to get more aggressive. So I use the support challenge matrix with my kids. I use the support challenge matrix with my wife. Like, when am I challenging my wife? When am I encouraging my wife? When am I being super supportive to my wife with my kids? When am I challenging them too much? But when I started building a team, I am goal oriented and driven, and like that's my personality. And so it was really easy for me to fall just into challenge. Like, it's not good enough. You're not doing enough. You don't want this bad enough. Otherwise, you wouldn't be giving me your activity report with not enough dials on it. You don't want this bad enough. Otherwise, you would have already figured out how to get the money for leads. You don't want this bad enough. Like, don't talk to me. Like, until you have done XYZ, like I'm not going to be able to help you with anything. I was way more on the like high challenge side. And, it's exhausting. It was exhausting for the people on my team of just like nothing they could ever, for them, it might've been like the biggest win they've ever had. Like they might have overcome an objection and they feel like they're getting traction on the phone and they're excited about it. And they're like, man, I'm getting close. Or I set an appointment. And I'm just like, man, you only have one appointment. Like, you need 15. Why are you calling me? You should be calling a client. That's a dominator culture, right? And like the supportive culture would be like, oh, that's great. Like, you don't need 15 appointments. Just run with this one, right? And so we want to be in the middle of those those two, that's amazing. I knew you could do it. I know you can do more. Like I know you can set the number of appointments that we need to set to get you where you want to go. Like, and I'm glad you're seeing the belief that I see in you. That's the liberator culture where I'm saying, I know you can do more. I'm challenging you to do more. Congratulations. I'm supporting you on the work that you did. And it took a while for me to dial back the domination of like, you need to do more, you need to do more, you need to do more, and learn how to be more encouraging and supportive and kind of blend those two things together. Like I said, in all these areas of my life, but I learned how to do it with clients. That's where I learned how to do it. And like I certainly wasn't doing it with the team when I first started. So like for all you people out there that don't have a team that are listening to this, it's like you can use, your support challenge matrix of when to challenge and when to give support when you're running appointments.
I think it's interesting because you kind of came from the standpoint of a little bit more in the dominating super, super high challenge. I came in definitely as that protector, very high support and not enough challenge. And so where I think like the meat in the middle starts with understanding what people want. And I think that's probably the biggest tip that I could offer is if you're someone who's leading a team or just even if you're leading one agent, what you first want to start with is really taking an interest, a genuine interest into what their goals are and what they're looking to accomplish. And then once you know that, I like to ask if it is okay with them if I help them to be held accountable for what they're looking to accomplish. Because if I get buy-in that they're okay with me holding them accountable to what they said they want to do, now the conversation that I might have 6 weeks later when they're not meeting the goals that they have doesn't come from a place of I'm this boss, I'm this dominator that's trying to, scold you for not doing the right things. I'm a business partner who is trying to help you get there and you didn't get there. So we need to figure out how we're going to bridge that gap. One thing I always like to tell people is if your goal is to sell 5 policies a week and you sell 4, I'm never going to come at you and yell at you because you didn't hit some imaginary quota that you put out there for yourself. I'm going to reach out and congratulate you for a good week, but then figure out what was the reason we didn't get to 5 and how do we make sure we fix that next week. So that's the important balance that you have. We always like to talk about, you hit them with kind of the velvet hammer, right? Every rose has its thorn, right? It's like, you kind of think of it from the standpoint of like, how do I have a conversation where I'm providing correction and coaching, and it might require me to identify things that this person is not doing correct, which probably doesn't make them feel good. But because of how I empower them and they see how they can break through it, they leave the phone call feeling better about themselves than when we started. That's what I think the best coaches do. They're able to give you things you need to work on, call you out on the areas that you didn't do, that you said you're going to do, and provide a tangible solution and a game plan for how to move forward, but leave you feeling empowered and feeling better than what you started. When I first got going on here, Carl Miller is better than anybody I knew at doing that. We'd have conversations where I'd call him up and I screwed up and he had to bring a little bit of tough love, but you know what? He built me back up. And at the end of that call, I always felt better about myself. Not only was I excited about moving forward and trying to kind of take that advice and implement it, but then I also just knew like, hey, I can do this. Not only do I know how to do it, but I feel good about the fact that like I'm actually going to be able to do it. So I think that's what some of the best coaches, do here. And I think that's what we should all strive for, is to be in a position where you're not afraid to call the kettle black. You're not afraid to kind of bring something up. And I think people really do respect being direct. Even people that are a little bit more nurturing, they do respect that you calling it out, but you have to do it in a standpoint where you're not attacking them. You're working alongside them and you're working towards a collective goal.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think that the way that it was taught to me, and this comes directly from Giant, it's not something that I made up. And it was something that I first didn't even hear from Giant. I'm pretty sure I heard it from Brian Delaney, that the way that you differentiate between domination and liberation is that the person that you're talking to knows that it's for them, right? That it's not for you. So the domination is like, my team needs this. I need this out of you. I need to hit my numbers. And like what you're doing is not good enough. And you need to, deliver the report to me, right? That's sort of the domination. But the liberation is a little bit more like, I know you're capable of this. Like, I know that you want to hit this goal and I want to help you hit this goal. And this is part of me helping you hit that goal is I'm helping you sort through whatever's getting in your way of hitting that goal. But you know, I'm only giving you this hard coaching right now because I have your best interests at heart. You gave me the permission when we set your goals early on to be straight up with you and to push you to help you hit your goals. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it for you. I didn't set your goals. These are your goals that you set. I'm just here as the person telling you, I know you can do more. I'm the personal trainer saying you got 3 more reps in you and you're quitting early, right? And like, I want to see you hit your goals and I'm just here to help you. So as long as they know that the coaching is for them, sort of like, to bring this back to the client, like the client interaction, I'm not saying I'm not leaving this house without a policy. I'm not leaving this house without you signing up for something. There's no way, like I could do that. I'm saying in good conscience, in ethical value of my insurance license, like there's no way I could leave here knowing that you just told me your family would be in a terrible position if you didn't have this coverage. And I could just leave here and not get you coverage. There's like in an ethical quandary here. If like something happens to you 2 weeks from now or something, and like we find out that I could have gotten you insurance, like the insurance commissioner was like, you met with an insurance agent 2 weeks ago. I'm like, did you tell him that your family would have gone bankrupt if you didn't have this coverage? I'm presenting it in a way that's like pushing you to do this for you. It's not for me. It's not for my commission. It's not for me getting the sale. It's not for me to be on the leaderboards. I really care about your family and I want you to be protected. And I think in the same way, it's like when I'm working with agents, it's like, I believe that you can hit this goal. And sometimes it's not like, why didn't you hit this goal? Why are your numbers short? A lot of times it's just like, hey, what can I do to help you hit it? I know that you're capable. You know that you're capable. We're falling short. How do you think I can play a different role in helping you hit this goal? And so now I'm addressing that we're short of this goal, but I'm also pulling up alongside of you going like, what do you need from me so that we can get back on this thing and we can hit it as partners, really? And I think there's different ways to bring challenge. And I've learned that as long as they feel like it's for them, then I'm living in the liberator culture. And, sometimes it's annoying because there's people on my team that like, they want to know my goals. And I rarely ever talk about my goals. I rarely ever talk about the team's goals. There's several people on my team right now that have no idea what my goal is for this year. They have no idea where I think our agency can go and how many writers or what our total APV could be. I have goals, I promise you. I go over them with my coach every day, or every couple of days. But my team doesn't really know about them because I've shifted so far into this culture of just like, I just want to help you hit your goals. I want you to know that every time I'm giving you advice, it's not because I want to hit my goals, because I want you to hit yours. And some would argue that maybe I could skew a little bit closer to the dominator line. But I think I've just had so much success living in this liberator side that I've gotten really comfortable here.
Yeah, I think it's funny you bring that up because I was just thinking, does our team know what our goals are? And I think that's one of those challenges of leadership is you almost feel like I'm being selfish to let them know that they're fighting for me. But at the same time, like there should be that reciprocity. There should be that element of, hey, listen, I'm holding you accountable to hit these goals that you set forward and I'm giving you the actual action steps to do it. But then I also want to be able to put that out there and kind of let you know what I'm fighting for. And, people do love the idea of kind of fighting for a cause and for kind of fighting for something greater. And so, that is another thing you should share with your team is what you're looking to accomplish because number one, accountability. Brian Delaney talks about this. In corporate America, accountability goes up, meaning if you got a boss, you got whatever your manager is, they're the ones who kind of hold you accountable. But, when you're a business owner, accountability goes down, meaning you want to let your downline agents know what your goals should be because you don't want to let them down. Like it's easy to let my mentor down, like whatever, it doesn't really move the needle for him that much. But for me to let my people down undermines my influence. It just really impacts, how I feel about myself when I'm communicating with them. So, final thing I wanted to talk about is if you're somebody, especially a newer builder who's building their team, how to know that you're investing time in the right things. And one of the most common pitfalls that I've identified is that people, as they start building their team, get away from the income producing activities that pay their bills, which is producing. And excuse me, one of the things that you want to make sure is that you're allowed to be excited about your team. you're encouraged to be excited about having a team. It's awesome that you have other people that you're working with and that you're able to kind of help hit their goals and that you're giving this opportunity to others. But at the same time, you need to realize that it is so easy to fall into the trap of investing so much time into trying to lift other people's up that you haven't made any dials yourself. You haven't written any policies this week. One of the things that I saw today is I saw a agent of mine. I'm in a bunch of different group texts, and she sent out a bunch of different texts to people being like, "Hey, how are you doing? Haven't heard back from you today. Have you made any dials? Where are your appointments at?" And it was from the like standpoint of like, I'm just trying to help and I'm trying to support. But then I look at this person and I go, well, she hasn't made any dials this week herself. She hasn't booked any appointments. She hasn't written any policies. So the way that you can help your team if you're a newer builder is you got to be the example. You can still reach out and ask how people are doing and be supportive, but you need to make sure that you're getting your shit done to begin with before you even worry about helping them.
Man, so this is an analogy that actually Edward Pritchett gave me that I've lived by, in growing an agency ever since. And it changed everything for me because I was that person that was like, because I can micromanage, right? So I can see like, hey, are you here? Or, hey, why aren't you on the dial team? Or like, hey, where are you? And like, hey, I haven't seen you in a couple of days. What's going on? And I was spending a lot of time having these interactions with people and like sorting through their feelings, really because like I was sharing before, it kept me from making calls, and so it kept me from doing the money making activities. And, one of the things he said was just like, look, Ryan, how much do you make per hour? So we went through, I got leads, how much it cost me for leads, how many hours it took me to dial, how many appointments I set, how many sales I made, what the net APV was after all issued. And we looked back at my numbers and, it was like, $180 an hour or something like that net is how much it was, or like 220 or something like that, whatever. Let's call it $200 for ease of use. And so he was like, okay, cool. So now you know that every hour you spend calling leads, setting appointments, running, appointments, whatever, it's worth $200, $200 an hour. Yours might be higher, yours might be lower, but do this for yourself. So he was like, every time that you spend an hour talking to an agent, I want you to envision taking $200 out of your personal bank account and handing it to that agent. Because that's what you're doing. You're taking $200 of your time away from producing and making money for yourself, your family, your business, and you're giving it as an investment to somebody else on your team. And so what he taught me in that moment was, at the end of each conversation, that conversation needs to be heading to a place that will ROI that $200. So I need to be leaving those interactions with agents with a game plan, a next step forward, what we're going to expect in the next couple of days, a date to meet and make calls, or, call me after you're done running your appointment so we can break it down, or, whatever. But I have to leave that interaction with some ROI from that $200. It could be that ROI is a game plan we're already working on and that we have a result and I'm just like coaching somebody towards a result that's going to ROI me the time that we've spent together. It could be immediate, just like you're going to do 300 dials and you're going to set 10 appointments or whatever. But our conversation needs to be angling towards something that's going to have a return on that time investment and bring back the money that I'm losing by not producing to my agency. And if I spend too much time doing it in a way that doesn't return money back, I'm going to be out of this business very quickly. And you can be an agency owner and be broke. You could have a huge agency doing 200,000, 300,000 and be broke. I promise you, I've seen it behind the scenes, quite a bit of people that just kind of lost their way. And then like they got flanked and they have agents that are on the other side of them. And like, they're not really making much money and they're spending a ton of time managing other people's teams and, they're broke. And so, building an agency in the right way is always looking at how you're ROIing on your time. And so I think like, how do I know that somebody's doing the right things is that like the bank account shows that they're doing the right things. I can see overrides coming in from them. They're starting to build teams and they're starting to become a long-term investment. How do I know who to give time to? It's like, I'll give time to anybody as long as that conversation ends with, some ROI, them doing that activities. It's not going to happen every single time, just like every lead you buy isn't going to ROI, but like it's going to happen enough if I do it enough that I'm going to be profitable with that time. And eventually they'll be doing the same things and I won't be given as much. Or, my time will be worth more like, $1,000 an hour. And then I'll be having $1,000 ROI conversations instead of $200 ROI conversations. So that's the way I've looked at it since he put it that way, man. And it was such sagely advice that's really what I've lived by since then.
Yeah, and one thing that one great tool that I was given was the productivity pyramid, and it basically has you kind of put together what are your high lifetime things, like what are the things that just you're going to fill your cup up for the long term, help with long, that might be like okay, working out, that might be my personal development, my reading. Those are things that have very high lifetime value. Can't really necessarily compute a value on them, but they're important. And then you have kind of your high dollar per hour. So you have things like I'm booking appointments, I'm running appointments, I'm doing an interview situation where I'm building my team. And then they have kind of low dollar per hour things like maybe I'm following up with pending business, which is still important, but it could potentially be outsourced or it could be streamlined. Or, maybe I'm spending too much time with, the wrong people where it's like they write policies here and there, but they don't really write enough for me to really warrant investing time on them. And then they have a section for both zero and negative dollar per hours. That's like you literally can put yourself in a position where you're making negative money by things like, worry, stress, things of that nature that just kind of put you in a mindset mode in the
TikTok.
wrong way. But yeah, also scrolling through social media that doesn't serve you. Yeah, unless you're running a TikTok, campaign or building a following that's going to help you get agents or get clients, that is not serving you. So it's just really important to really think at the end of the day, like it's so easy to be busy, but are you productive? And that's maybe a topic for another time. But like I think really evaluating what your time is worth and if you're going to give it to somebody else, it's so important. I've had to really be careful about, times that I've been asked, even to volunteer my time to host another agency's call, and I want to be there to support and I want to give back, but there is kind of a threshold that I allow for that. I can only give it so much time. There's time that I invest into agents that are not part of my agency, and I'm happy to help and give back because there's been agents that have supported me when they had no financial connection. But again, I got to put a limit on that because I need to evaluate, what is my time worth and how am I investing it. So all that to say, we really hope that you're able to be a little bit more reflective as you're developing your teams on number one, understanding what are the ways to kind of not only handle conflict, but not let it knock you off of your path. I think that's probably the biggest thing is like not letting the conflict and the drama affect where you're headed. And it's so tough to stay in a positive, uplifting mindset if you have some negative things around you that you have to handle. But that's just where there's a lot of tools like being extremely grateful and writing a ton of business. And when I look at my bank account every morning, I whatever conflict comes my way, I'm not really worried because I'm good. And then as you're working with your team, evaluating, am I bringing the right amount of support? Am I bringing the right amount of challenge? And there might be a time where you have someone that isn't really doing what they said they're going to do, and you might need to have an uncomfortable conversation and call the kettle black and call them out on it. And they're going to respect you for that at the end of the day, even if it doesn't feel good. And then there's going to be times where people are just beat up. They don't need your advice. They just want you to listen to them. That's one of the biggest things I'm working on is I've got a solution to most people's challenges within our business, but I found that most people don't want me to give them the solution. They just want to talk through it. And that's what's going to help them overcome. So you have to evaluate if that's what people need from you as well. So Mr. Federico, as always, thank you for your sage contributions. We are going to be back
Mic
at
drop.
you here next week. Again, same bat place, same bat channel. Make sure you drop us a comment. Maybe talk about what conflict or what things you've been able to effectively overcome and how you did it. Make sure to subscribe so you keep having our content come your way and being at the top of your feed. And we will see you next week. Thanks, everybody.